Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today we are on day 6, I think, of These Champs Suck, and How to Fix Them. Where I basically go through the list of all the champions Riot has told us don't have even one deck with a 50% or higher win rate. And we go through the champions, 3 each day, and look at them, what maybe has gone wrong and how we can fix that. And we have 3 interesting champions today. Again, another one where you'll be surprised, I think, at one of the champions on the list today. But again, I didn't make this list. I just took Riot's own internal data that they gave us to create this list. So a surprising one is on there, but without further ado, let's get into it and see what we suggest. So our first champion today is Viktor, and this is obviously not the surprise. I'm sure most of you expected Viktor to be on this list, and probably want him to be buffed in some way. He's already seen one buff, which was when he's summoned, he creates the hex score upgrade as well. I'm pretty sure that was the only buff that Viktor got. But I think Viktor should be in line for more buffs, if I'm honest. I would, like to see a Viktor deck become pretty good. But Viktor, is just kind of slow and kind of too random to be good. You can get very good keywords. You can get, overwhelm and challenger and elusive and regeneration potentially as well. And you can go off with those, but then sometimes you can get ones that just aren't really working that well or don't work that well in combination. Like if you got overwhelm and elusive, that's kind of somewhat redundant. So sometimes you can get those and it just feels a bit bad. But sometimes you can hit the nuts, but that ultimately leads Viktor to, people tend to, at the top level of play, go away from these random strategies unless it's very, very powerful, just because, they prefer knowing what's going to happen in their deck. So Viktor has that problem for him. I think another problem Viktor has is that his leveled up condition is just kind of mediocre at best. You think of, particularly within PNZ, and this is what really surprises me about Viktor's design, is that within PNZ, his own region, most of the created cards that you're gonna make are not like mana intensive cards. They're mostly 1 mana. You think of the mushroom clouds, and you think of the hex core upgrade, or you think of like ballistic bots, ignition. They're generally pretty low cost cards, or even like pyro cannon. Within the region. Anyway, so it kind of always surprised me that was what his level up is, because in reality, like, the only thing that I think that really works with is the celestial cards, because reducing their cost by 1 does make sense, and it is a help. But you'd rather just play Mountain Scry, who gives you one of them as well and will reduce the cost of it. So it's kind of, and doesn't require leveling up beforehand, and is the same mana cost. It's like, you just play Mountain Scry, and that's kind of how it's played out. So that's another big problem Viktor has. Another problem Viktor has is that, this Death Ray card, like, is not good. It's as simple as that. Like, you literally cannot play it, which is a big problem for Viktor, actually, now that I think about it. Because, of course, you want to kind of commit to Viktor, give him those keywords, and the first Viktor you play, you kind of want to keep on the board because, you just want to give that first Viktor as many keywords as you can and go from there rather than having to play a second one. So having a really bad champion spell is not good. And you might think, well, why is this such a bad champion spell? Well, it's because particularly in the later stages of the game, Viktor's Death Ray Mark 1 is probably not doing much. And then you're guaranteeing yourself a draw in the next 3 cards that probably isn't doing that much either. And then you're doing it again. Like, these effects just aren't good later on in the game, and at minimum you're going to be getting them on turn 4 and later, and more likely you're going to be seeing them on turn 6 and 7 and 8, and by that point dealing 3 to a unit is doing nothing to kill their Captain Ferron or whatever. It's doing literally 0. So having a pretty terrible level up spell, champion spell rather, doesn't help either. And that's why Viktor is bad. So how else can we look to improve Viktor? And is there anything wrong with his sort of followers and support cards as well? Well, yes, there is. You know, Ballistic Bot is obviously nuts. You know, that's just straight up. Obviously, we've just talked about Death Ray. Iterative Improvement is okay. Neandroid, I think, is okay. Our Gearhead isn't great. Mechanized Mimic is not great. And that's kind of, you know, and Calculated Creations isn't great either. But I don't want this card to be too good, because otherwise you can basically just put 6 Ballistic Bots in your deck, and I wouldn't be, you know, that wouldn't be great. That wouldn't be ideal, I don't think. So how can we change this whole package? How can we change Viktor? Well, let's start with the support cards first. I think the first thing I would do is definitely change the Arm Gearhead to be a 1/2. I think that would be a very good change. Arm Gearhead is only really going to get like super value in decks that go all in for Augment. Which is fine. I have zero problem with a card being really good in a deck where it's meant to be really good. A good example for this is Sparring Student, and I know a lot of people have problems with Sparring Student, but I personally don't. I think that that is good design, because I prefer it when cards are really good in one deck where they're meant to be good, rather than, you know, cards being generically good in a lot of different decks. And yeah, sure, maybe the deck needs, you know, the deck could use with a sort of bringing down to earth, but I don't think that Sparring Student is a problem, and I don't think Sparring Student should be punished for being good in the deck that is meant for Sparring Student, if that makes sense. So I do the same with Armed Gearhead. You know, if Armed Gearhead becomes really good and in a full Augment deck, good. That's what should be happening either way. So I have no problem with putting Armed Gearhead to 2 health. I think that would be a good change. And the other card that I would change would be Mechanized Mimic. I think this could be a 3/5 as well, maybe even 4/5. I mean, really, you know, and just give them a sort of big, you know, sort of threat. You know, more health on this, obviously it becomes harder to kill. You can get, you know, potentially more and more keywords. I think it's a really cool... I think Augment is one of the best keywords in terms of fitting within a region. I think it's very Piltover and Zorn, and it fits everything that they want to do, and it makes sense. And this whole, you know, granting keywords, this, you know, getting extra things from other units with different keywords, it makes sense. And I think that that is... This is like a really cool card design-wise. That it's unfortunate that it's so weak that it's never seen play. So I'd like this card to, you know, see some sort of stat increase as well to help it along. And then we can come to Viktor. So with Viktor, as I said, to me, his biggest problem is his level up form. The created cards costing 1 less is just not useful enough for, you know, Viktor, really, and then the region he's in. Doesn't make enough sense. So what I would like to see for Viktor is that instead of your created cards costing 1 less, what I would like him to do, as it the round start, or when summoned, I guess, I would like him to create a card, a fleeting version of a card that you have created this game, if that makes sense. So for instance, you could get, you know, something like an Ignition. You could potentially get something like, if you've used Calculate Creations, you could get, you know, whatever unit you've sort of created. You used Iterative Improvement, you could get that. You know, you could get a range of things, but the idea is that Viktor will, instead of, you know, making your card cost 1 less, that probably costs 1 either way, instead he's going to give you another card. Which is a big deal, and getting an extra card each round is like an actual thing that has value, and particularly if you can make it, you know, like a Flash of Brilliance into, like, will give you a 6 mana plus spell. If that's like a good 6 mana plus spell, then, you know, you're getting a free one from Viktor. That could be, you know, a big deal. Those are the kind of things that I would like to see for Viktor, because then, you know, he would be worth leveling up. And I know some of you might think, oh, well, wouldn't there be maybe some sort of weird combo that you could do where you only play 1 created card, and then, you know, Viktor just continuously gives you this same overpowered card? Well, not really, because of course you have to level him up, and it would require playing 7+ created cards. So, you know, unless you're playing only, you know, unless you've got like only copies of that one spell that you're creating over and over again, which obviously would be sort of the nuts hand, I guess you would call it. You know, which is it's fine for, you know, to every deck to have like a 0.1% chance of hitting an absolute dream combo. I don't think most people would complain about that. Then it's just not going to happen, right? And maybe, you know, maybe that would fix Viktor. I think that would certainly help. I don't think that they're going to do that because, you know, they've mentioned before they don't really like reworking cards because it takes time. But I think that that would be, you know, if I could just magically change it, that's how I would change Viktor, because unfortunately I don't really see a way for Viktor to be that good unless they, like, you know, reduced his mana cost in a way. Like, if he was 3 mana, that would be another way you could make Viktor pretty good, I guess, but then he might just be sort of generically too good, and I think that that's, you know, always what I'm looking to avoid is making a card just generically good. I'd rather it be much more synergistic. And so I'd keep Viktor like that, but change his level up condition, and yeah, that's what I'd do. And let's move on to the next champion. So our next champion is Kindred, and let's talk about the problems Kindred has. Well, when we all saw Kindred, we thought, wow, this is nuts. You know, a lot of people thought that Kindred was going to be crazy, crazy good. And I think that a lot of us fell into the trap. Pretty much when people overrate cards when they first see them, and I've noticed this pretty much with every card that people overrate. The same is true of Jarvan, I think. A lot of people were pretty high on Jarvan. And I wasn't. And the thing that they always do, it seems to always be the case. They read this part of the card here. They read the ability. They go, wow, that's a really strong ability. And then they just completely sort of disregard this number in the top left. You know, that is like way, like really, really important. And that's what essentially happened to Kindred. You know, we all read this and thought, wow, that's crazy. But then we didn't really think, you know, what if the game is over by turn 5? You know, we didn't really think about any of that. And so that's why, you know, Kindred just has never really hit it off, in my opinion, is that they are just a bit too slow. Kindred just comes down to the board just a little too slow, and maybe it's a little too easy to kill Kindred itself. So in my mind, Kindred needs a significant buff, but you have to be careful, because the thing is, the current state of the game, you don't want to give like Thresh Nasus just like a better option than say Thresh. Like imagine if like they buffed Kindred to the point where a Kindred was better than Thresh again in that deck, and then that deck was even more dominant. You know, buffing Kindred right now is a scary proposition because Thresh Nasus exists, and obviously a lot of the cards that are part of Kindred's sort of toolkit are really good, and you know work pretty well. You know they brought out Fading Icon, which is a good card. You know, the Wings and the Wave, I think, is, you know, proven to be a pretty decent card. You know, Mass Mother is even seeing some play in those Cytheria decks. Spirit Leech, of course, is a good card. Like, you have to be pretty careful with Kindred, because if you buff Kindred too much, then, you know, that won't be fun for most of us. So what can we do with Kindred? Well, I think a stat increase for now would probably be the best thing you do, unless you sort of nerfed significantly the sort of whole Shadow Isles like package. Like I'm thinking of like nerfs to like Cursed Keeper and Ravenous Butcher and I don't know, like maybe Fading Icon. You know, just like unless you really like hit Shadow Isles pretty hard, I would say probably avoid Kindred. My ideal would be for Kindred to be 4 mana. I think that would be, you know, a big help for Kindred. That would help Kindred see quite a bit of play. But I don't want to do that in sort of a state where Shadow Isles are just going to dominate, if that is the case, if you understand what I mean. So, like, unless they significantly nerf Shadow Isles, I'd say, you know, just maybe go for a +1 on the health and hope that, you know, that helps. But without that, unfortunately, I can't, you know, really change Kindred in the way that you want to, because I would make Kindred 4 mana, a 4 mana 4/4, and I sort of hope that that would be good enough, you know, and allow Kindred to come down quick enough and be a big threat pretty early on, to where killing, you know, the weakest enemies is a big deal, because sometimes when you're on turn 6 and 7, you know, and they've just got like a little spider that they just played or whatever from a Valfeast or something, and your Kindred kills it, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. You know, you really haven't gained that much value. So, but on turn 4, you know, when they don't have that many units, you know, maybe they've got 2 or 3 units, you know, killing that spider there can actually be a big deal. You know, it can force blocks out that wouldn't necessarily. It can force a lot of pressure where they would have trump blocked with that spider, but now they can't. You know, they would have tried some things with that spider, maybe a glimpse or something like that, but they can't. So that's what I'd ideally do for Kindred, but unfortunately, I think it would also require, balance the other way in terms of the whole of Shadow Isles as well. So unlikely to see that happen, but I think maybe in the future it definitely could when Shadow Isles maybe is a bit worse. So hopefully we'll see that one day for Kindred. And last but not least, we have our surprise, which is Swain. Now, I did a video about Swain and why Swain is the best design champion in the game, and pretty much everyone agreed, which I was kind of shocked at. But yeah, everyone loves Swain. Everyone loves Swain's flavor. Everyone loves, his design. He feels unique. He feels, and I think someone put it best in the comments of that video where Swain has been in tier 1 decks, but it's never felt like the problem. Like, if there was ever a problem with those decks, it's never been Swain, but he is good enough to see play in tier 1 decks. Yeah, and I completely agree that Swain isn't frustrating. Like, it's not frustrating to play against Swain. It's just, like, such a great design. I just love Swain's design. Anyway, Swain does find himself, though, on this list of champions without a 49% win rate deck. And, I mean, we all love the design of Swain, as has been proven. So, I'm not going to touch Swain, of course, because I love his design. I think if you were to touch Swain, like if you put a gun to my head and said change Swain in some way, buff him in some way, maybe you could give him 4 attack, but I think that would be pretty much it. For Swain, I actually think Swain's biggest problem is that, a lot of the sort of decks that he would synergize well with just aren't quite there. You think of Bilgewater as kind of a prime example of a region that Swain could synergize pretty well with, but obviously Bilgewater has been sort of gutted recently. And that's kind of, left a big hole for Swain as well. Also, Equinox is, still existing in the game, which is sort of always going to be a problem for Swain as well. There could be some Freljord things in there, but I think just right now, I feel like a Swain Sejuani deck is maybe just like a couple cards, like it's a couple cards away of being pretty good. But unfortunately, those couple cards aren't there. So it's close, but there's slightly better things to do. Draven Ezreal, I think just this is like a slightly better version of kind of what that deck wants to do. Maybe, Draven could get nerfed, right? And Swain could replace Draven in a sort of Ezreal, Noxus PNZ sort of deck. That could be the case, right? If a Draven got nerfed. So there are still options for Swain out there, so I don't think Swain is in like a really terrible position. But we can look at sort of, these are the cards that came out with Swain during Rising Tides. Obviously Leviathan, Demolitionist, Death's Hand, Fervor, Flock. There's plenty of good cards here. Ballista is good as well. There's some that I haven't seen as much play, and I think I would buff one of them, and that is City Breaker. City Breaker has never really seen play, and I think is just a bit too slow. And I think also perhaps at that time, the devs maybe didn't fully understand that having 0 attack is kind of a big deal in this game. It really is kind of a big deal. Pretty much it is a bigger deal than I think most people would expect, perhaps coming from other card games. But having 0 on attack, because this game is generally combat focused, you have something that can't trade with anything, it's just going to soak up damage rather than deal any, doesn't give you board control, kind of like landmarks. This essentially is kind of a landmark in that sense. You can sort of view it as a landmark, and I think that maybe this even would be a landmark if it came out today, if you know what I mean. If they had designed landmarks beforehand, this probably would be one. But I think that this can come down to 3 mana pretty safely, and would be perfectly fine. As I say, this might be one of those cards, right, for a Swain Sejuani deck, because it synergizes with them both really well, that you could use. And I think that, a buff to this kind of card, I mean, it's slow enough to where you're not going to see it in aggro decks. This I wouldn't be worried that much, if you're thinking, oh no, Noxus aggro will be, oppressive too much from City Breaker. I don't think that this card would be nearly quick enough for that to be the case. But I think, for decks like a Swain Sejuani that are probably, looking at winning the game on like turn 9, maybe 10, then, this is a threat, because if this has stayed on the board that long, if this has stayed on the board and dealt, 5 damage, then that's a problem for your opponent. But, I think in most cases it probably won't. But, yeah, I'd like to see City Breaker buffed, and I don't really have much else to say, because we all love Swain's design. There isn't too much else to change, without, potentially breaking something like Death's Hand. I think, is a card you kind of want to be careful with, because it has the ability to just be like really, really good. Fervor's good. You know, Siege Play, Leviathan obviously has been pretty good. Nemo's good. Flux good. Ballista good. These two maybe, but they don't really synergize with Swain that well, is what I thought. So I prefer buffing Satebreaker here, and that is our 3 champions for today. So yeah, another day down. 3 interesting champions to talk about. I went on a bit of a rant about Viktor there for a while, but I think Viktor needs changing more so than the others, I guess. And I would love Viktor to be good because I think he has a really interesting design. But yeah, we got 2 more days of this, which should take us to Saturday. If I'm not mistaken, what today is a Thursday. So yeah, Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday I'll probably do a video about cards that need to be nerfed. We might even do a 2-part series on cards that need to be nerfed, because, you know, there's probably a lot of discussion about that to be had. So we will, but yeah, I'll probably do a 2-part series on the Sunday and the Monday, and then the patch notes will come out on Tuesday, and then the patch will come out on Wednesday, and hopefully we can enjoy the game again. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow with 3 more champions and how they need to be buffed. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.